Theaters are dying. That is the claim being made by the media, the Hollywood intelligentsia. They, you see, are angry that their favorite movies are not succeeding. Audiences don't care what they're being told they should like. And therefore, the narrative must be that audiences have abandoned the theaters. No. Audiences have abandoned bad Hollywood movies. And we're about to break it all down for you right now.
Good afternoon, good morning, whatever it is, where you is. Thank you for joining us.
That's right, wherever you are on this little blue marble that's floating in a ray of sunlight, folks, we're happy that you are here with us. We appreciate each and every one of you. Joining me to talk about this issue with the theaters is Tom Connors of Midnight's Edge. Tom, welcome back to the channel.
Well, thank you for having me, and I'm glad you have me here because this is a topic that's kind of close to my heart because about 2.5 years ago, basically when everything shut down, I took a lot of crap and a lot of flack for saying studios will realize sooner or later that they need the theaters a heck of a lot more than the theaters need them, and I think we've hit that point. But I think you got an interesting article here that we're going to go over that. We'll see where things end up here after we're done reading this, but
absolutely, and
it's going to be a fun summer. It's been a fun summer, and I think it's going to continue to be for the next couple months.
Well, I think we're getting a continuation out of 2022 where the films that Hollywood and the writers who write about Hollywood, they're not happy about which ones are failing and which ones are succeeding, and it defies their expectations over and over again. They are unable to predict because they do not understand reality. They do not understand the world in which they live. They don't know their neighbors, and they definitely don't know their neighbors' neighbors. So let's dive in. As we do, folks, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, and you can stick it to the algorithms when you click it. We're talking about that notification bell. Here we go.
Yeah.
This Out of the Street by Daniel Klein. And we hate to pick on Daniel Klein, but it's got to happen this time. Disney Warner Brothers failures signal the end of the theater era. Movie theaters had a nice run, but there's nothing AMC or Cinemark can do to bring back 2018. Oh dearie dear. Here's what it says. The movie business died right about the time of its greatest success. Domestic box office and global box office numbers hit their all-time highs in 2018, with 2019's numbers being very similar. As those heights were being hit, however, it had started to become obvious that only certain types of movies could drive box office returns. People would turn out for their latest superhero movie, certain action franchises, Star Wars movies. It doesn't mention that it was becoming decreasingly so. And a limited number of kids' films. Romantic comedies, almost said rom-coms, which is apropos. And anything even vaguely aimed at a solely grown-up audience has very little chance to make a mark at the box office. Regular comedies, even the so-called hard R genre that gave us The Hangover, Bridesmaids, etc., no longer have any real chance of success in the theaters. Now, Tom, you are an expert in this matter. Where is this going wrong?
Well, first of all, I think they're putting all the focus in the wrong place. And I think you and I agree on this sense. As I said in the opening, people will go to the movies if there's stuff they want to see, right? And that's where the studios have really ignored the theaters and ignored the idea that people will show up in droves to see a movie. I mean, look at what No Way Home did. Look at what even Avatar 2 did. More recently, we had Mario Brothers, of course, that overperformed.
Tom, we've had some of the biggest movies of all time come out.
Exactly. Yeah, so I don't understand where this mentality is coming from. I think they are running interference for the studios because, let's face it, they make movies for themselves first in hopes that everybody else will like them. And when they don't, what has been their MO? Is to blame the fans, and it's like, wait a minute, that's not how this works, you know. But yeah, we'll get deeper into that. I think,
it's all the apocalypse when they don't understand what's happening around them. Tom, let me explain what's going on with comedies, and then you tell me what's going on with rom-coms. Does that work?
Sure.
Okay, here's what's going on with comedies, folks. This is very simple. They cannot make a comedy because they're terrified that their jokes will be taken poorly, and in the age of cancel, in the age of woke, you can't make a joke. And that's where we are. And The new movements that have come about have made it impossible to make you laugh. That's where we are. Thank you, wokesters. Tom, what's going on with rom-coms?
Well, I mean, this is a broad issue because first of all, rom-coms have generally been um a steady winner at the box office. Let's say they're cheap to make for the most part, and they have a solid crowd. It's a, date night movie generally. But when you have things like, and again, I apologize to your audience because I know it's generally, you try to keep it a little bit more PG, but even a movie like Bros is difficult to talk about in a PG context, right? That's the problem. And I've even had,
right.
I even discussed this with a few of my friends that happen to be gay, and they said the same thing that I think we all kind of thought when we saw this movie or saw the trailers or whatnot. And that is, I don't want to watch this. I'd rather watch something with Julia Roberts and George Clooney, and
Yes.
lo and behold, we had a couple of rom-coms or Sandra Bullock or whoever, like they say, they like those same movies for the same reason straight people do. It's because they want to go see these actors that they enjoy in these funny situational comedies, even if it's an Adam Sandler, Drew Barrymore movie, like those even do better than some of the other stuff, right? So like just seeing two actors that they like to see together in a situation where they're going to wind up together at the end, that's just what they sign up for and that's what they want. And traditionally, we've had no problems with those. Lately, though, we've gotten rom-coms like Bros, outside of the few exceptions. And then coming up this weekend, and funnily enough, we have this movie with Jennifer Lawrence. I can't think of the name of it offhand. No Hard Feelings, I think it is.
Yes.
Where normally that would be the character she's playing in the movie would be a side character played by a guy that you're not supposed to like. Right. So that's the other weird shift in these movies and it's not just in movies. We've seen this with a few TV shows too, where you have women acting like badly behaving men. Does that make sense? Like,
yes,
where
and
you normally
how do you have a rom-com when you can't have a masculine man that women are attracted to, and you can't have a feminine woman that women can identify with? It's all
Exactly.
androgynous now.
But look at the 2 or 3 comedy, romantic comedies or whatever that have done well lately, and it's been that one with Sandra Bullock and what's his face?
What's his face is good enough.
Yeah, the one about the Lost City or whatever, and then George Clooney and Julia Roberts had one out here recently too that did pretty well. Even J-Lo had one, not J-Lo, Jennifer Lopez had one here not too long ago that didn't too half bad as far as I know. But again, the beauty of those films compared to the superhero fare is they don't cost that much to make, right?
Exactly.
You can literally make them for a dime, but like you got to get the butts in the seats to see them. And a movie like Bros even had a bloated budget for a rom-com. So like that's another big problem is A, you have bloated budgets and B, like you just said earlier, that's the biggest problem is you can't have, I think it's more so just men behaving in a certain way. Cause that was my point with the Jennifer Lawrence comedy is you can have women acting that way in movies.
Yep.
You just can't have men. So there's another problem.
Tom, walk us through too, because we're here to explain entertainment, right? Walk us through too, both comedy and rom-coms have the same problem now. Once upon a time, they could take off in a secondary market. That's gone. Walk us through what that means.
Well, what a secondary market usually is they have like their theatrical premiere. And then after that, it would go to home video and video on demand. And then eventually it would wind up on cable and television. And that would usually last about 4 or 5 years. And that was for every movie. That's not just for rom-coms, but just in general. But that was better for rom-coms because they would have especially longer lives on things like video, right? Because women are more consumers of television as to where men tend to go to theaters more is kind of the trend. And so things like rom-coms and stuff like that tend to have a longer life on video and television than some other things do. So that's another thing they've kind of destroyed is just in general, they've destroyed the secondary market. And to me, that's where it's like you need the theaters more than you ever did before now.
And that's just lack of foresight on the part of entertainment. They did this to themselves. It isn't that the audiences have left the theaters. It's that they have created a system now by which they cannot make these movies and make the kind of money they used to because they've killed off their secondary markets, and then they just don't make these movies at all. It's worth mentioning that the Austin Powers series of movies, the first Austin Powers was not a success at the box office. And if
It
it
did
came out
okay, but
today,
yeah, it was
yeah, but then
video
it
that
took
helped it.
off. It took off, from rentals, right? People going to
Well,
Blockbuster Video and Planet Hollywood,
it also
or not Planet
managed to
Hollywood, Hollywood
coincide
Video.
with it also the first and second films also coincided with DVD taking off too, which helped. And again,
Yes, yes,
that's
a great point.
a home video thing, right? Like, so the first film, like you said, I think it did 60-ish million, I think, in the box office, maybe a little bit more. First one did,
Right.
but once it hit home video, especially DVD being available to buy right away, like that was probably one of the first DVDs a lot of people bought, was
And
Austin Powers.
that
Yeah.
has made these studios reluctant to take chances on content like that. They can't take chances. They go for these huge superhero films because they believe that's guaranteed to make money. Now,
Pretty
Tom, let's
much.
take a look.
Yeah.
Let's take a look at one more line from this article that we were reading.
Sure, sure.
This is about they're talking about these two movies that they wanted to do well for reasons that are not dissimilar. It says Disney's latest Pixar movie Elementals and Warner Brothers Discoveries, The Flash, its latest DC comic books superhero film, both had mediocre at best opening weekends. No, they did not. They had horrible weekends. This has been a trend for both companies, and while it's easy to make excuses, those excuses cover up the real problem. No, we really should do the excuses. We should talk about those, and we'll come back, folks. We're going to tell you what the pundits out there, what they are saying are the real reasons that Elemental failed. Pixar films used to be a guaranteed box office hit unless a film truly registers with the audience, as only Encanto has in recent years. There's simply no reason to see it in theaters. A family can't wait a few months, or excuse me, a family can wait a few months and watch it on Disney Plus without spending any extra money. The same logic applies to all but the biggest Marvel movies. Americans might go to theaters to see all the Avengers get together, but we can wait a few months to see what Ant-Man is up to. Tom, why is this not true for everything else? Why is this only true for Pixar films and for The Flash, but it's not true for Top Gun Maverick? It's not true for Sonic the Hedgehog. It's not true for Mario. It's not true for Avatar. Do we need to keep going? It's not true for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Why is it that it only applies to these films when Hollywood gets mad?
Yeah, it's selective. It's selectivism or whatever you want to call it. And it really is at the end of the day, because look, The Flash, is it underperforming compared to what even people like you and I probably thought it would because of Michael Keaton? Yes. But what does that mean? That means one of many things. It means people either are just sick and tired of superheroes or the DC films in general, which I could honestly see, because none of them have made any money really since what? Aquaman, basically.
Yeah.
Other than that, I mean, Ezra Miller, his persona may have permeated the general public by now. That's a possibility. I have a feeling some people were turned off by the idea that James Gunn is going to be rebooting this, and they know it's going to lead nowhere. So that's a possibility. But I think that's the smallest factor in this, because most people don't pay attention to that kind of stuff. I think the other part of it is just this, going back to the superhero fatigue part. And this is more or less, I don't think it's so much superhero fatigue as it is just big bloated tentpole fatigue. That's the problem we have here. And I think that's probably the heart of the problem. This article that we were, dissecting here is that, look at this list here. You've got The Flash, a Pixar movie, a Spider-Man animated sequel, a Transformers film, a remake of a very popular Disney film, The Blackening, which is modestly budgeted comedy. We'll just set that one aside for now. And Guardians of the Galaxy there, which is a Marvel film, right? So right there in that top 7 films alone, if you take out The Blackening, like I said, right there's 6 movies that are basically in that $100+ to $200+ million budget range. On an average in a year. Yeah, on an average in a year back 20, 30 years ago, you were lucky to get them many tentpole movies out of an entire Hollywood, not just one studio.
Well, let's look at that. What do we think The Flash cost to make?
We know it cost well over 300 probably at the end of the day, but they will report 250.
We know Elemental cost 200 million.
Yep.
We know Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse cost what, 150?
I think somewhere it was a little bit more than the first movie. That's the thing, but luckily it made the difference up. So there you go.
Transformers is going to be expensive. The Little Mermaid cost in excess of $300 million. So these are very, very expensive films.
And Guardians was 200. So there you go.
And now let's look at this. Let's look at the total grosses. This is why they're declaring the theaters are dead, despite the fact that they're not. despite the fact that we've had some of the biggest films ever. Look at The Flash. The Flash was supposed to, according to the punditry, The Flash was supposed to net something like 120 to 145 million in its opening weekend. That was what they were projecting just 3 weeks ago. It is yet to cross the 70 million mark, and we are midweek after its first weekend. Elemental, the Pixar film that's supposed to be the story of immigrants and immigration and racism and all this stuff with little fire and water people.
And a little mixed
race. It has yet to break 40.
Marriage.
Yes.
And all that stuff, yeah.
It has yet to break 40 million. It has yet to break $40 million. This movie may not break 100 domestically. It's insane.
Well, if we stop there for a moment,
crazy.
Disney has a whole nother problem on its shoulder besides the bloated problem, right? And that's right. And it's kind of ironic that we got The Little Mermaid and Elemental up there right now, because what are the two factors that are probably turning audiences off more than anything with these two movies? With The Little Mermaid, it's the virtue signal factor, right? And people didn't ask for it. Elemental, it has a virtue signal factor as well. But another thing is it doesn't feel like a Pixar movie. It doesn't have that I need to see it kind of thing about it. You know what I mean? You go back to all the classic Pixar films. There was one thing that they all had in common, and that was once you saw that trailer, it was like, I gotta see that one because it looks interesting. And even at their lowest points with things like Cars back in the Lasseter days, even Cars, the original Cars, has more going for it than this looked like had going for it in the trailer. And I mean, and just about anybody could look at the trailer and go, yeah, it looks like somebody trying to copy Pixar, but it's not Pixar.
Well, listen, Tom, back when Cars came out, let's do an example here. Back when Cars came out, I don't remember there being anything about non-binary vehicles being in that movie.
No.
And listen, folks, I'm not here to take a position on any of that. We're here having a marketing discussion right now. So put aside all the morality issues, put aside all of the cultural issues for a moment, and let's just deal with marketing. What is one of the biggest things that I have heard about Elemental last week? That they have non-traditional characters, and there are actors out there celebrating on the social media sites about how they got to voice a character that is non-binary inside the movie, etc. This was never the focus of the marketing in the past for any of these films. Now it seems like it is. Now it seems like children's content is the place to go if you want to see advertising circling around cultural content. I don't understand how anyone would think this would be successful. Tom, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think that's the problem here is you have overall, look, it's a marketing issue. I mean, when you stop to think about it, I mean, the movie itself is a problem, yes, but these companies should be like, especially the marketing side of things, should be bumping heads with these people going, you're trying to attract the smallest possible demographic here. This makes no sense whatsoever. Because in trying to appease this smaller demographic, you're turning off a much larger demographic. Now, if this was a rom-com or something like that, it'd be a little different scenario and different conversation we're having. But what we're talking about here is considered a family film, right?
Right, you're aiming for 8-year-olds.
And the reason I say this is because Disney, especially Disney, knew exactly how to conform their films in a way that no matter what your religious background was, no matter what your family lifestyle was, you could safely sit your kid in front of this movie and enjoy it with them and not have to worry about anything coming up that's going to cause some kind of uncomfortable conversation. And I know some people out there are just like, well, maybe you should have that uncomfortable conversation. It's like, no, I think some people are well within their rights to say I shouldn't have to talk to my 3-year-old about same-sex marriages.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to be like, not with my 4-year-old.
Exactly. Like there's a time and a place for these things. And when they're a toddler, it's not then.
I want to tell him not to put popcorn up his nose, darn it. That's what I want to deal with.
Bigger problems here. Yes, exactly. Without getting too graphic. I don't need to worry about him chopping something off as much as I need to worry about him shoving something up his nose.
That's right. I don't want to clean the butter out of there later.
Yeah.
That's what that's what raising little kids is like.
Everything he has, he's putting up his nose.
Well, Tom, let's take a look here, though. This is fascinating to me
Yeah,
because
yeah.
it shows that Hollywood has done this to themselves. Just as soon as April 23rd, box office new 2023 global revenue forecast issued on eve of CinemaCon. This was by Pamela McClintock. Again, I love Miss McClintock's stuff that she puts out by the Hollywood Reporter. And we really just, here's the subtitle that's important. Leading box office analytics firm Gower Street has increased its projection for the year from 29 billion to 32 billion in movie ticket sales. Now, what was going on? Mario was going on. And uh, things were looking very sunny. They were very optimistic about where things were going to go with the box office. That has now dropped. It has not dropped because audiences don't want to go. No, audiences were going. It has stopped because Hollywood is producing content that audiences don't want to see. And the key thing here, if we go to this article out of ScreenRant, we've jumped around a little bit today. This will be our last article. But this one by Sarah Little, I just want people to understand that the folks who are in and around Hollywood, they don't understand this at all, or at least they don't seem to. This article says 10 reasons why Elemental bombed at the box office. Only one or two of these do I actually believe had any impact at all. They are ignoring the elephant in the room. And Tom, I'll come to you in just a moment. And I want to know, do you think they believe these to be true, or do you think they're being disingenuous and they don't want to discuss what's really at the heart of it? Let's go through the list here. Number 10, Pixar is no longer the prestige brand it used to be. Okay, I'll go with that, but that's Pixar's fault. Number 9, audiences know to wait for Pixar movies to go on Disney Plus. Well, that's not the case with other animated stuff. Puss in Boots was out there killing it in the theaters, and it was on streaming at the same time. So families seem to like to go to theaters sometimes. Number 8, the Elementals can premiere backfired. Well, I don't know how it backfired any more than just the regular. I mean, what do you do with a bad movie?
How any different it's going to be for Indiana Jones in that respect? Yeah.
Oh, that's the one where it really backfired, because that put out 5 weeks of horrible
bad
reviews.
Press. Exactly. Like,
Number
that's
7,
the thing.
Elementals.
Nobody's been talking. I didn't even know Elementals premiered at the Can until we're just talking about this.
Well, and you know why? You know why? Because whoever's in charge over there figured out this is going to fail. This is going to fail miserably. We have to put it out, but there's no need to market it. Why would we add more to the loss? So, number 7, Elementals reviews were good, but not great. Yeah, I think they were bad. Number 6, Elemental opened in a very crowded summer movie window. Not so much. It seems like everything that's been coming out has been downgraded, wouldn't you say, Tom? It seems like since Mario Brothers, we haven't. Well, maybe Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse did well, and maybe Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, but everything else has been lackluster.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that crowded. Nothing is really coming out this weekend but Counter Programming, the J-Law comedy. That's exactly the best thing that could have ever happened to Elemental and Flash. So this is really like this is all on them now. And this goes exactly to the heart of what we've been saying, plus that other article. Like, you have 2 weeks now, basically, where these two movies had chance to play without any competition. And we've had arguably one of the lowest box office weekends in history last weekend for summer box office.
Nothing rose in spite of everything else being bad. They were all bad. They were all stinkers.
Of course, you have to constitute in inflation, but even back in, I think you'd even have to be hard pressed to find a 90s and the 80s box office that was that flippin' bad. Because I mean, the box office has averaged over $100 million every weekend for years. And if you have something like a Spider-Man No Way Home come out where it actually makes 200 or 300 million in its opening weekend, or 100 million or plus or whatever, you already have a box office that's overperforming. And what you have had here is a lot of films that have overperformed. The one that's in front of our face is a good example, but it didn't stay, right? And that's not...
It isn't holding like... And I had thought it would do better on the whole than it is, by the way.
I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you why. Because this movie, and it's not anything other than everybody who was going to go see this movie went to see it opening weekend. Because the first movie didn't play that well in the theaters. It had a life on home video, speaking of our secondary market conversation we just had here 10 minutes ago. That is where this movie is going to shine and continue to shine, and this franchise is going to continue to shine. And it overperformed as it was. So anything it's making right now, Sony is considering gravy, because I think it's already outperformed the original. from
Well,
my
I said this was
understanding. So,
fine, but I didn't give it a glowing review. I thought I have a philosophical disagreement with the film in terms of the way it ends. I want if I go see a movie, it should be a movie. It should have a beginning, a middle, and an
well,
end.
and
It
that's the
doesn't.
biggest
This one
complaint
doesn't.
I've heard too. See, I didn't care for the films for various reasons that I'm not going to get into because that's not important. And I didn't even go see this one, but I was not so surprised by its overperformance at the box office. And the reason is I knew how popular it had become on video and streaming since it had initially come out, and people just kind of ignored it in theaters because it was an animated film. Now, granted,
Right.
I cannot deny the effect this film has had on people, but these kind of films right here are prime examples of why there shouldn't be a failure. And this idea that they're trying to place between this article and the last one that we were reading is that these failures are failing, even though there is these other ones that are winning. No, these failures are pulling down these other winners, right? Because if the box office is strong, people are going. Because I'll tell you one problem I had when I was younger going to the theater, because we only had one 6-screen theater anywhere within a driving radius of teenagers. So
Right.
what we would do is we go, and if something was sold out, we'd just go see something else. And we had
Yeah,
that
sure.
problem a lot. See, I've not run into a problem where something has been sold out in years.
Yeah, I'm trying
Not
to think.
since I think Joker was the last time I think that. And the funny thing about that is I went into that movie and it was sold out, the 2 screenings they had. By the time we walked out, each and every other screening of every movie had been taken down and they were all Joker. Because that movie
the
was
last time
cool.
that happened was The Force Awakens for me. I think it was the last time that I actually ran into an issue where I could not find a seat very easily.
Yeah. But that's
been a
what I'm
while.
saying. And I'm sure people probably ran into that problem with Spider-Man, but like you and I, we were a little early to the game probably. And that one really built on word of mouth. And when stuff started leaking out about what really was going on there and confirmation of leaks and whatnot. But yeah.
Yep. And I think that, I think 0.5 to me is dumb because Across the Spider-Verse is a superior animated movie choice for families. That is a euphemism for Elemental is bad. So let's just say that instead. It's just it's a euphemism.
That's about the only thing they got right is if you look at it from that perspective. Yes.
Elemental is an original movie in a franchise era. This is number 4. I think this is a purposely false narrative.
That is one of the
media
dumbest
is spinning out there.
Things. I agree because Pixar, what is Pixar known for most of all? Their originality. Even though,
right,
like I said earlier, their stuff isn't as original as you think about. The problem
Pixar,
is the way
Pixar
they
is almost the franchise in and of itself, Tom.
Exactly.
Like you see Pixar and you know the territory you're going into. At least you did at one time.
That's what I was saying earlier. Exactly. It's that sign of quality, that sign of, it's something I got to check out then.
Number 3, the box office is struggling generally. Again, I don't believe that. It wasn't true in April, and I don't think it'll be true in July. I think Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning is going to blow the doors off the theaters.
More of a symptom of the problem. And the problem is bad movies. Yeah.
Number 2, people might go see Elemental later, but it probably won't be enough. Yes, and water is wet and fire is hot. Congratulations on number 2.
This movie is dead on arrival. Nobody cares about this. It has zero appeal to kids. I have not heard any kids talking about it. Even people I know in this sphere that have kids, I've asked them about it and stuff like that. And Andre is a good example because he's got 2 young ones. This ain't on their radar.
Right.
As far as I know.
I don't know who this movie was made for. I mean, honestly, maybe like 18-year-old emo chicks who want to see a rom. Well, it's not even funny, so maybe just a romantic animated movie. That's a big demo to chase after, eh?
I think that's the core problem we have here is even though not the general public may not necessarily know how to put their fingers on it like we have, like I think that's the big thing is they're getting sick of being preached to, right? They're getting sick of everything they go to see having one of these messages in it, right? And nobody is saying a movie can't have a message like that. There's usually a time and a place. And believe it or not, the weird thing is Taika Waititi was out talking about this recently at some writers thing. I can't remember the exact name of the thing, but I think he got it was for some award. I don't know if I don't think he got the award, but he was speaking at it. And it's like refreshing to finally hear some of these guys talk about how unnatural some of this diversity, this forced diversity feels and this messaging and stuff like that. And things that
Tom,
he was alluding to
is
things I've been saying for a while is there are places and times for these kind of messages in movies. It's just not this. But go ahead. Sorry.
Tom, this is so funny. I was watching and I rarely watch television, but I was watching television yesterday, and a commercial came up for a local fast food chain. And I kid you not, the family that was eating at the fast food restaurant, the family, right? Every single one of them was a different race. And I actually had to laugh a little bit. I mean, that.
Did you hear my Harrison Ford in the back of your head going, "That's not how the Force works"?
Well, the Force is now a euphemism, I believe.
For everything.
Let's wrap this up with number one. Pixar's marketing plan for Elemental was lackluster. Well, that's what happens when a bad movie is coming out and a studio or distributor knows it's a bad movie. They pull the marketing. Now, what this ignores, Tom, is what you and I have been discussing, which is that Hollywood is struggling with these movies. They want to be winners, but the problem is that the winners are preaching, and they are preaching a message that not everybody can fully disagree or fully agree with. And because of that, they're losing their customers. They're not going to be happy. I'm telling you right now, they're not going to be happy when Phoebe Fleabag Waller-Bridge comes out and is roundly disgusting to the audiences for Indiana Jones, the Dial of Destiny, and that bombs. They are not going to be happy when Tom Cruise comes out and blows the doors off the theaters. Again, this is not what they like. They hate the fact that Chris Pratt has the 2 highest grossing films so far of the year. They despise it. And that's why they're not willing to tell the truth. Tom, am I right? Wrong?
I agree.
Or are they just so thick-skulled, if I can pronounce it correctly? Are they so thick-skulled that they're oblivious to what you and I are even talking about?
I think it's more cognitive dissonance than it is anything, I guess is the best way to put it, because I'm sure they know there's a problem, but they just, and I kind of went off on a rant on this recently too, where it's just like, they can't fathom it. They can't understand it. They can't imagine it. Perfect example is, and not to get too political here, but just on a general level, is a perfect example is Samuel Jackson's recent statements.
Oh my gosh, yes. Wipe out half your customers and
exactly my
half
point.
The customers of an upcoming film that you're not even related with.
Exactly. Because it's like, why would you even say something like that? You may think that, but you don't say that kind of a thing in public. And the reason I say this is because that's my point, is these people think that way. They cannot understand how most people don't. They still don't think that person that we're talking about even won the election, right? They still can't fathom that many people wanted him to be president. So this is the cognitive dissonance they have. And it's the same thing being applied here to these movies. And I think number one reason on that list goes to prove that they can't even put their money where their mouth is, because they pulled the advertising, not us. They did. Now, if they had spent the full amount of money on the advertising and the movie still failed, then maybe they'd see part of the problem. But I think that as long as they keep playing these games with us, they're never going to admit it, bro. That's the problem.
Well, Tom, let's just play out the marketing side of this, of how ludicrous it is, talking about the Samuel L. Jackson thing. Imagine that you walk into McDonald's and they say, "Welcome to McDonald's," which, by the way, would be an improvement over what normally happens at McDonald's. But let's imagine that happens, where they say, "Welcome to McDonald's. Oh, by the way, if you're pro-union, you're the enemy. Get out." Like, what? How idiotic would that be? You would never do that at McDonald's, because if you are a manager at McDonald's, you know your job is to sell hamburgers to everybody. And these actors have they've lost their minds, out here calling half their customers the enemy, as opposed to trying to be as unifying as possible and entertaining as many as possible. Maybe they don't want to do it, but I'll guarantee you that the studios, that's not in their interest at all. But Tom, any final thoughts on it? Are the movie theaters dying? Are they dying, or are we headed for a much better horizon?
I don't think the theaters are dying, because we learned during COVID that they knew how to survive. I'm sure some of them suffered, and some of the bigger corporate theater chains had to do some restructuring and other things. But I think the core of the issue is, and always has been, the studio system and how it works. Because prior to COVID, the bigger problem was they kept trying to take more and more of the money from the movies. And what that was doing was leading theaters down this path of not having enough money to function. And that's where, before COVID, a lot of people would say, "Oh, I'm sick of going to the movies. I don't want to go to the movies." And I'd ask them why. And 99% of the excuses they would give me, I could always trace back to, well, the reason of that is because they can't afford to hire people to do this, to do that at the theaters. And that's why you have this problem. And it all stems back to the studios wanting, 70% of the box office that opening weekend of every one of these big movies. And when you have a movie that is front loaded, and especially look at these Marvel movies, for example, how front loaded are most of them lately? Like they'll make a $200 million opening weekend, and then they'll be lucky to make, $40-50 million in their second weekend. And then it's just chump change after that. So like when you got a theater and their bigger part of the money comes in later, they don't have any money to work with. And after COVID now they've found themselves in a bit better of a position because they've been able to negotiate better splits. And what that's causing now is the studios to go, wait a minute, we're not making the kind of money we used to on these big bloated special effects films, like all these Marvel films and other, comic book like fare, because I brought this up too, is that not only the Marvel movies and the superhero movies a problem, they have escalated everything else around them. Like a great example is we got Mission Impossible coming out now. And recently, earlier this year, we had Fast X. How much are those kind of movies now compared to these action superhero films, right? The same kind of action films have to compete with that. Tom Cruise has to jump over a valley because of those movies. You know what I mean? Right. And so it's escalating everything around them. And it's causing this problem where studios are spending way too much money on these movies. They're not in a position where they can negotiate with the theaters anymore because they know they need the theaters, but the theaters got smart and got a bit more, they found their time to make their move. And when the studios thought they were going to kill the theaters off during COVID, it actually came out the other way around. And it was more like the theaters had their boots on the studio's throats and it said, this is how it's going to be. And
those
if you don't
darn
like
Wall Street bettors saving those theater chains.
Exactly. Because at this point, that's what would happen is over the last 10 years, 20 years, is the studios have had the theaters in a stranglehold. And when they weren't looking, the theaters like took advantage of that. And they're like, no, you thought you were going to kill us? We're going to come back stronger than you ever thought before because you don't realize how much you need us. And in the meantime, they tried to kill their secondary market on, that we talked about earlier. And that made them even more vulnerable to theaters. So yes, the studios still need the theaters, but the theaters are going to be like, look, you're not going to give us what we want. We're going to add more concerts and sports events and other things to our calendar and Fathom events that we don't need you so much. When we're showing Empire Strikes Back for its anniversary and it's making more money than the Pixar film, that's a problem.
Per theater, Return of the Jedi outperformed any other movie. Or
just more recently, Return of the Jedi. Yeah. But I remember, during 2020, the year of COVID, Empire Strikes Back was one of the higher grossing movies of that year.
You're exactly right. I think the bottom line here, folks, is theaters are going to be fine. Hollywood needs to make good movies. And when they make good movies, they get rewarded. And when they don't, well, that's where it goes. Well, folks,
we hope Mario Brothers and less Elementals, yes.
Yeah. Folks, we hope we have explained entertainment, kept you ahead of the culture curve, and perhaps dissuaded you of the fears that theaters are going down the drain. No, it's simply the bad movies that Hollywood seems determined to make. And folks, remember, if you like content like this, consider clicking the like button, share, subscribe, stick it to the algorithms. When you click it, we're talking about the notification bell. The commentary here is over between the two of us, but the comments for you begin right now. Drop a comment down below. We covet your comments. We care about what you think. The Pro Show is live Thursdays, 5 to 7 p.m. Eastern Time. We hope you'll be there. And folks, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, keep learning, keep growing, and keep having fun.
Make sure to catch The Pro Show Thursdays, 5 to 7 Eastern Time. Entertainment explained, the culture curve conquered, live with Pro and all his friends.